Hi, everyone, and welcome to Get Hired Live. I'm your host, Andrew Seaman, the Senior News Editor for Job Searches and Careers at LinkedIn News. I'm coming to you live from New York City, and I'm so excited that you're here. As always, I want to ask you to introduce yourself in the comments section. So tell us what your name is, where you're from, and also about your job search or, what you're looking to do. Maybe you're looking to level up in your career. Maybe you're looking for a job in a new industry. Whatever it is, tell us your story. We already have so many of you joining us. I see we have our friend Dolores from Dallas. We have Ben from South Bend. That rhymes. Stephen from New Jersey, just across the river from me. Mia from LA. Jennifer from Illinois. And I believe Zarina from Tajikistan. And I think I saw some people from India, Cyprus, and Turkey. So we have people joining in from all over the world. Keep introducing yourselves. We have such a great show. And as always, what I want you to do is pay attention to the comments and interact with each other. Maybe you see someone who is looking for work in your area, whether it's literally the area you live or the area of the workforce. So maybe they want to go into aviation, maybe they want to go into hospitality or finance or something like that, and you could help them, or maybe they could help you. So reach out to each other. Networking is the cornerstone of a successful job search, and what better time to start than right now? So just make sure you're making those connections and reaching out to each other, and even keep the conversation going offline. And today we have such a wonderful guest for you. I'm really excited to have her on the show. So let's bring her on. Jasmine Escalera is joining us. She is a career coach. Hi, Jasmine. How are you?
Hey, hi, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for joining us. And, I'm so excited to have you here. And you've had such an interesting career path, because even though you are a career coach and you help people sort of transition into maybe what they want to do next or get them to their next step in their career, your background is actually in pharmacology. You have a PhD from Yale. So can you tell us a little bit about your career path?
It's so funny. Every time I go on a job interview, they ask me the exact same question to start. It's like, what are you doing here? So I actually fell in love with science, with chemistry, with research when I was in high school. I can remember the exact moment my high school chemistry teacher was mixing a bunch of things, creating colors and smoke. And I was just like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. So my love of science really drove me during my academic career. And when I was younger, I really wanted to be a pharmacologist. I wanted to go out there and work for Johnson & Johnson, make tons of money. But while I was going through my PhD, I really started to recognize that the community that I came from, the community that advocated for me, the community that championed me, was the reason why I had gone so far in my academic career. So I really wanted to give back and to do something more. And so I went into the nonprofit sector. And for the last 10 years, I've been helping nonprofit organizations build and design research and clinical programs that solve questions around healthcare inequities for populations in need. And it was really the opportunity for me to be able to give back to my community, having seen all of the disparities there, and really the opportunity for that give back.
And that's such an important mission, especially now as, we're going through the pandemic. Those disparities are exacerbated, those gaps get bigger. And, we need to make sure that we don't allow them to get bigger. We need to close them up. So that's such a worthy mission. And thank you for sharing that. And when we were talking before the show about what we wanted to talk about at the top of the show, and you mentioned about being your authentic self. And I know this is something that I think everyone struggles with, because especially if you're a job seeker, and, we have so many of them in the stream. And, before actually we get to the topic, I just want to say a quick hello to, Jason from Kenya, Derek from New Jersey, Sissy from New Orleans, one of my favorite cities, Pablo from Miami, Kim from North Carolina, and Carla from Atlanta. So we got a lot of people in the stream from all over the world. And, I think a lot of people, when they're job searching, or, they're new in a workplace, or even if they get a new boss or something, they almost like tighten up because they feel like they're being evaluated, that they feel like they're under a microscope, and they have to fit a form or a stereotype of the ideal worker. And, it doesn't feel comfortable if that's not who you are, if that form doesn't fit you. And, why is it important to be your authentic self? Because it goes beyond just the idea of, being comfortable in your job. So why should people, focus on like, don't worry about that sort of mind, that evaluation, be your authentic self?
Yeah, so I'd love to connect that to my story because I grew up in the projects in Brooklyn, New York. So when I actually went into college and into graduate school, it was the first time, to be 100% honest, that I was jarred. I was kind of taken aback because my community was full of black and brown faces. We all lived, the lives that we lived. We had fun. We were outgoing. We were energetic. And when I went into sort of the STEM field, I was hit pretty hard. I started college in 2000. I'm not trying to date myself, but the industry was very white male dominated. The industry is incredibly, incredibly, passionate in many ways, but very competitive. And so for me, I felt a direct pull to conform to the environment. I felt a direct pull to sort of strip myself of my identity and to become a different individual to try to fit in. I always wanted to be successful in every single career endeavor, but I was too young to understand how important authenticity and really embracing your identity was. And because I was incapable of doing that, I made a lot of missteps in my career, and I didn't feel comfortable being in so many different spaces. So I didn't speak up. I didn't advocate for myself. I didn't connect to my worth. And feelings of imposter syndrome and self-doubt held me back so much from really being able to achieve the success that I wanted. If you can imagine it, if you don't feel like yourself, you're not embracing yourself, you're not connecting to yourself, and automatically you're not going to be able to achieve what you want, because you're not just being you. So I felt that very often throughout my career. And so the importance of being yourself and having your identity and really being you is so that you can achieve the career you're really seeking and looking for. And you're not, in essence, holding yourself back with limiting beliefs or negative mindsets. You're allowing yourself to achieve the success you want. So that's how I see authenticity in the workplace, is connecting to you and connecting to what you really want in terms of your career.
Yeah, I think that's so wonderful, especially, how you related to your story. And we do have, I think it was Steven from East Flatbush who said Brooklyn was in the house. So there's some other people from Brooklyn there. And we have Dolores saying, I think it's good to be authentic, as Andrew states, but some people trip themselves up and overshare in job interviews and the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts on that? And also, what do you suggest people do to make sure they're being their authentic selves, and how to operate in the workplace?
Yeah. So I think, people get confused with authenticity and being real. And, I'm all about kicking it real. Like, we always have to be real, but there is a professionalism that you can bring in terms of your authenticity. You have to understand where you are in the space that you're in, right? So I think it's really important that when you go on job interviews, that when you're actually at the workplace, you are authentic to yourself. You are being true to you. Hey, look, I wear my big earrings. I have a neck tattoo. I do all of that stuff in the workplace because that's who I am. But you also have to maintain professionalism and understand the standards of where you are as well. So I think it's really important to embrace the identity, to embrace you, but to also understand the corporate culture and the environment that you're in as well, and what's acceptable versus not acceptable.
Got it. And, for people who are out there, I want you to make sure that you're getting your questions in, because we're going to be taking them in just a bit. So make sure that you are getting your questions in. We'll be taking them in just a few seconds. So, I think one of the things that sometimes people trip up on, I think this is also what you were mentioning before, is that sometimes people, they get confused over what being authentic means. And one thing that about me is that I tend to be very talkative. I'm very animated and loud. I'm big, loud, and proud. But that doesn't mean that I don't sometimes tone it down for people who don't respond to that. And I know that's not easy for everyone, and that's completely understandable. But if I sense that someone's like quiet and they're a little bit introverted and they don't respond to that type of energy, I do try and just sort of pull back a little bit and say, okay, I respect your space. I respect your communication method. So is that sort of that boundary you're talking about?
100%. And I think that when you are having a conversation or communicating with an individual, it is important to also understand how that individual communicates. So effective communication is a two-way street. I remember reading this beautiful book where it said communication, if you're communicating to someone, it's really mostly about listening and understanding how they receive a message so that you can essentially get your point across and be successful in the conversation. So I think it is very important. And I love that you said, you're very loud and animated. Me too. I'm very Brooklyn. But when I'm around certain individuals or in a certain workspace, I do tone that down. But that doesn't make me feel as though I'm being inauthentic. It makes me feel like I'm being an effective communicator and I'm meeting the person at the point at which they can hear, understand, and reflect back and have a communication or communication style with me. So I think that's important.
And I'm seeing some comments in the stream from people who say, listen, but I worry being my authentic self or sort of being who I am in an interview or something like that is going to mean I don't get the job because maybe the person doesn't respond to me or they don't like who I am. So what is what do you say about those fears that people have?
Yeah, so here's the thing, and again, I want to reflect it back to myself. So there have been many times where I haven't been my authentic self, either in a job search or in a work environment. And guess what? When I started to feel doubtful, when I started to really recognize that I wasn't being me, and then I tried to be me, or I wanted to be me, or I put more of myself out there, I started to receive a lot of backlash because the environment wasn't accepting of who I was. I think it's important that you start with who you are at all points. If you are in an interview and you feel like you can't be yourself because you're not going to get the job, then you're not going to be successful in that job because you can't be you. So it's important to be able to bring your authentic self to a job interview because you want them to hire you. In order to be successful and to thrive in any career or career environment, you have to be able to be yourself, a good worker and also you. And I think those two things go hand in hand. When you can't be yourself, it affects your work. So it's important during a job interview to let the person know who you are. I think that's essential.
Yeah, and I think you're eventually going to run into a boss or a manager who basically says, hey, this is the person we want in this job. And, you're going to run into a manager who says, I want these diverse personalities in the room because this is going to make us stronger. So, not every manager is going to be like that, but hopefully you'll run into the one that will, and they're going to appreciate you for who you are. So I think that's really wonderful advice, Jasmine. Thank you for all of that.
Yeah.
And I think, in that same category, we have a question here from Steve, who basically is saying, hey, listen, how do you stop an interview, or when do you stop an interview when you realize maybe you don't like the company that you're interviewing for? And this has happened to me before, where I've basically been in an interview and I'm like, I don't want to work here. For me, I totally relaxed, and me and the hiring manager ended up having a nice conversation. We both parted ways, just basically saying, okay, well, bye. So what is your advice for people who find themselves in that position?
I love how you said it about you just kind of relaxed. I almost sort of feel like that's exactly what has happened to me in those situations too. I'm like, well, I ain't never gonna work here, so I'm just chilling right now. So I think it really depends, right? So there is this sort of thing of like, if you recognize during the job interview, but the job interview is going good, that this really isn't the place for you, you can just finish and carry it out. If, though, you feel like this isn't the place for you because there's some kind of discrimination or they're saying things that you don't want to hear or that shouldn't be said, then that's the moment where you do want to shut it down because your safety is so important. So I think it really depends on what triggers or what red flags you're seeing, and then you can dictate an appropriate professional response. If it is just that this isn't really the vibe for me, then stick it out, have fun, enjoy. There's always something you can learn from every single experience, even if it's just practice.
And also, I think, like you said, just have fun, go through with it. And usually those are the first conversations. So you're not really going to be worrying about taking up too much of their time. So it's not that they're going to be super angry. Some will every once in a while, but for the most part, they're going to say, oh, okay, thank you for the honesty. And you're going to stop the process early on in the days. So they're not going to be too invested in you, and you won't be too invested in them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have a question here also from Jennifer. And you mentioned the imposter syndrome that some people experience. And Jennifer basically wants to know, how do you defeat the imposter syndrome and self-doubt in your head? What advice do you have for her?
Yeah, so imposter syndrome and self-doubt has been something that has wrecked me for so much of my academic and professional career. And to be 100% honest, I didn't know about imposter syndrome until only a few years ago. But once I was able to actually name it, I was able to claim it and empower myself to overcome it. So much of self-doubt is really negative thoughts and limiting beliefs. So I'm the type of individual that the one thing that I tell people all the time is journaling helps. Getting your thoughts out of your head really helps. Another thing that I tell individuals to do is to do a tracking exercise. I'm a researcher. I love data. So when I was really trying to overcome my negative thoughts and my self-doubt, I kept a book with me, a journal. It was called my thought journal. And I would write out whenever I had negative thoughts or negative feelings or was feeling imposter syndrome, and what were the direct triggers of that. Once I was able to see and understand my thoughts and what was triggering me, I was more capable of being able to flip the script and really flip the negative thoughts into positive, but also understand, was there something that I needed to do? Did I need to learn something new? Did I need to ask for feedback or advice? Did I need to talk to my supervisor about something? So really tracking the imposter syndrome, the triggers, the thoughts, the feelings, helped me to better understand and take action. So that's an exercise that I love to give people to do.
I think that's a great exercise, and I think there's a lot of people in the comments responding to it. And Ginny also in the comments said that she has an interview today, so congratulations and good luck, Ginny, and that she thinks the conversation is going to help her going into it. So I'm happy to hear that. And we have another question here from, I think it was Mary, who is asking, how do you address the salary question in an interview? Because a lot of that happens to do with often imposter syndrome. You don't think you're worth as much as you should be asking for. So how do you deal with that? And what, because it's almost like a dance, you don't, it's kind of awkward and you're not really sure who's supposed to make the first move.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great way to say it. Who's making the first move here? But I think in terms of that, I go back to, being the researcher. I think it's so, so important to know your worth and value. And the best way to do that is to do the research first. So you can use different websites like salary.com and payscale.com. You can put in exactly your job title, where you live, and it'll give you a salary range. I think that's the most powerful thing you can do, is to know what the industry standard is and know what you should be making. And that at least gets you started in terms of the conversation. I love to use facts and data. So whenever I'm negotiating salary or talking about salary, I always lead with, well, the industry standard for this position is within this range. And that gives you something to stand by too, because you don't want to be lowballed. And the best way to do that is to know what you should be getting paid. So I would say 110%, do your research beforehand. Knowledge is power, and it will give you the power to speak up, stand up for yourself, and claim your worth.
Definitely. And I think, just know, like you said, do that research. And it's really easy to just reach out to people and say, hey, I'm looking into these positions. Can you tell me what an expected range would be with various experiences? And people are very open about salaries nowadays. So they don't have to necessarily give you their salary, but they could say, hey, you should be expecting anywhere between, 30 and 60,000 or 40 and 70, something like that. And, depending on experience. So those are sort of the questions you can ask. And also, and Mary did add this in the comment, basically saying that something important to know is that many states are rolling out a bans on history of your salary. So they can't actually ask you what you were making before you made the jump to a new job or when you're looking for a new job. And there's good reason for that. So if you can avoid it in interviews or throughout the process, try avoid mentioning what your previous salary was, because that often ties you to that. And you don't want it to be based on what you were making. You want it to be based on what you're worth and what your skills and talents are worth.
That I absolutely love that, and I completely agree. You know, I've seen that happen before, where someone will say, "Well, this is what I'm making now," and then that's it. You're done.
Exactly. And we have a question here from Sweta, and she wants to know about managers hiring with personality tests these days. So I think there's a Netflix or HBO documentary right now going on about personality tests. And what are your opinions on these? Because they're very controversial.
I don't like it. I'm adjusting myself. I don't really like it, because I feel like what you say in a personality test captures a moment, not necessarily what you do in your everyday life. Although I am the Cosmo Queen and I take every single freaking test that Cosmopolitan puts up, I don't like personality tests when it comes to job interviews and when it comes to seeking candidates. I think, you get so much more value and understanding of the individual when they're sitting in front of you and you ask good, rich questions about their experience, their history, what they do, what they want to do. I think you get so much more value from that than taking a test. It's just a snapshot and it doesn't give you the real personality. So I'm really not digging it.
Yeah, I completely understand. And I think there is so much more to learn about a person just sitting in front of you. Maybe they're a bad test taker. And I know a lot of these companies, they do try and make it where your background in test taking shouldn't influence the scores, but sometimes it does. One caveat I would mention is that sometimes when you're applying online, you will be asked screening questions. And basically that is for a company that says, I will not accept anyone who has less than X amount of experience or doesn't have a certification. So that's not a personality test. That's the company saying, I'm not going to waste your time. You don't lie on the questions, because it's just going to be a hard no. So, people who work in healthcare, they need certain certifications oftentimes. So if you apply, it's probably going to say, do you have an RN degree? Do you have an LPN degree or something like that? And if you say no, you're just not going to be able to get the job anyway. So that's not a personality test. A personality test is often more about, like, in this situation, what would you do? So know those distinctions. And speaking of nursing, we have Teresa in the comments who is saying, how do you address the salary question when you have a career gap? So she mentioned nursing. So if maybe you're a nurse and you had to take some time off, a lot of people have to take time off for relatives, loved ones, for various reasons. So, how do you feel people should approach that?
I think you should approach it in the same way. Your career gaps oftentimes provide you with a different level of skills and an enrichment of skills that you can still utilize on the job. So I think you should approach it in the same way, Teresa, in which you really go ahead and look what the industry standards are. Many of these websites go so nitty-gritty where you can put your years of experience in there. So play around with it a little bit, but I would still address it the same way. You are valuable, and the things that you have done, even during those transition periods, provide you with rich skills that you can bring to your next step. So don't disqualify yourself. Do the same thing and claim your worth. That value is there.
Yeah, definitely. And, when I always tell people that, just because you took time off work doesn't mean your talents are less valuable. And it's just that the market may have changed, but that's something to explore, like you said, and do that research.
Explore it. And if there are changes, then, I think with nursing, things change so rapidly. There might be some certifications or trainings you can do. But I always tell individuals, like you said, Andrew, don't discredit yourself. Like, there's so much richness there.
Yeah. And we have another question here, and I think this goes back to our conversation about being your authentic self. And this question is from Jennifer, and she asked, do you have any recommendations for those who have invisible disabilities when their limitations can affect their work performance? And obviously there are a lot of people with a range of capabilities, and sometimes if they're limited in certain areas, it may not be something visible or something obvious to an employer.
Yeah. So again, using myself as an example, because it's the easiest thing to do. I have anxiety. So I do have a mental health disorder. And for me, that is something that I deal with every single day. And so I had to be very, very comfortable with acknowledging my limitations myself first, and then really going deeply into what is it that I actually need to be successful in the career environment. And I had to be very comfortable with being open with that, either with HR or if I could with my supervisor, to really be able to help them understand that there are certain things that I need to be successful. So I think it's very important that whatever you feel you need, that you talk to someone about that. And you can do that with HR. You know, HR is the best place to start because they are your advocate and they are there to help you and to help you understand what you can do in terms of the work environment and in terms of what you need. So I would say that if there's anything there, really understand what it is that you need to thrive and be successful and advocate for yourself in that area.
I think that's, yeah, great advice, and sort of the idea of, asking for benefits or asking what the benefits are during the interview is really important to make sure you get that out of the way. And obviously the HR department should be able to answer that. One thing that I always do is I have, horrible anxiety too, and some OCD. And, it is limiting sometimes, but I talk openly about it, and we try to normalize it in the workplace. But I think there's a lot of things that can be done, and hopefully the employer is also sort of open and upfront about, this is a place for you, despite what limitations you have, because there's probably a lot of other things that you have that make you excel more than anyone else in other areas. So
yeah,
I think
healthcare setting, and during the pandemic we were still going into work, which heightened my anxiety through the roof. So I had to be very clear with my boss that I need to be able to work from home some days to really offset that. So I think it is very important. You just have to acknowledge what it is that you need. There's nothing wrong with that. And then you have to advocate for yourself. So that is so incredibly essential. And thank you for bringing that comment up, because I do think that the workplace needs to start becoming more inclusive in so many different ways, and also acknowledging that, sometimes we can feel like we have to leave ourselves at the door when we come into work. And I think that's actually the work culture propagates that thought, but you are a whole individual and you should be able to ask for what you need when you step through that boundary.
Yeah. And we have a question here, and I think for a Yaley, this is probably a great question. Do you think it is worth investing into a certification from a top school to stand out as a candidate? And that's from Karina. And I think a lot of people are maybe juggling this question, especially since we're still in a recession, we have the pandemic. And what a lot of people think about during that time is, okay, maybe I'll bide some time and get a certification or a master's degree. What's your recommendation on that?
Yeah, so look, I am never not going to say that having a degree from Yale didn't open many doors for me. But guess what? I have a PhD in pharmacology from Yale, and the actual skill sets that I use, the project management skill sets, the operations management skill sets, I got those from certifications on Coursera. So I just want you to acknowledge that there are definitely benefits to getting, a degree from a top-ranked school, and a lot of those have to do with connections and opening doors. It definitely helps, but there are so many other platforms right now that are doing great things with training. LinkedIn is one, Coursera I love. There's a lot out there. So I would almost kind of test the waters with what you're capable of achieving with something that might get you some results a little bit quicker and less expensive, and see how you can work those first before you make a major life-changing decision.
Definitely. And in fact, I just spoke recently to someone at Google and someone at Amazon who they both are offering free courses online in project management and a lot of other areas. So those are free certifications you can get, and free programs that you could take part in. And if you just Google around, you can find them. Actually, a lot of companies are offering them, and Microsoft and LinkedIn I have a number of offerings too. So just looking around online, you can find a lot of them. And a lot of them are free. So that's even better.
No, I would love to tell you that you should spend $200,000 on a PhD from Yale, but I'm not sure about that.
Yes, as someone who went to Columbia, it's definitely a hefty investment.
Yeah.
And I guess, for people out there, we have questions about salary coming in, and Zandra asked, if you're offered a salary that is too low, how do you ask for more without offending the employer?
I think the best way to do it is to go back to the industry standards. I really do. I like to fight things with facts, and it's hard to really have a company push back when the fact is this is what people are making. So if you're getting lowballed, then it's really important to utilize those facts and that data. The one thing I do want to say is I work in the nonprofit setting, and nonprofit organizations are typically funded by donations or federal grants. So that's a different kind of play, because with federal grants, the range for salary can sometimes be set and actually not be changed. So you really want to understand what industry you're stepping into, because sometimes there's not an opportunity for negotiation. That happens a lot in the federal space. It happens a lot in the nonprofit space. So, just be understanding of what you want to make, where you see your value, and making sure that your target companies match that.
Yeah. And, for our last question, this is something that was asked earlier, and I always like to, cover it during the broadcast because it is such a problem: ageism. For people out there, especially, when we talk about authenticity and being yourself, a lot of people who are in their 40s, 50s, and beyond worry about, being themselves or showing their true age will cause themselves issues in the hiring process. So what is your advice for people who need to defeat ageism?
Yeah, that's something that I myself am thinking about, as next year I'm hitting 40. Yikes. So I think it's really about, again, connecting to your value. There's so much that you can offer, and there's so much experience that you have, and you want to look for companies and jobs that are looking for exactly that. So it's important that you really stick to and understand your worth and value and connect that to jobs and companies. So you really want to try to do that. The other thing I would say is networking is essential and key. I think that networking lands so many new opportunities and possibilities for every single job seeker. And it's the opportunity for you to show you first and your value without having you put on a piece of paper and having someone judge you first. So do the networking, put yourself out there, connect to your value, find the opportunities that match you. That's a great thing for you to do. If you're networking and if you put yourself out first, it's a great opportunity for you to be able to meet someone where they are at and really discuss how your qualifications match what they're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's such a great piece of advice. And one thing that I've always found is that, if you have something that you're insecure about, own it and, go in there confidently, because that will project onto the other person. And it's something, as a reporter, I had to learn that, when you ask someone their age or something, you don't sort of dance around it or sort of be the person that, oh, I'm sorry to ask about your age. I know this can be sensitive. Go in there with confidence and say, I have all this experience and I wanted to put it to work for you. So I think, what you said was such great advice. And thank you so much for all of your advice.
Thank you. This was great.
Yeah, and I hope people were following at the bottom of the screen for all your information. You post a lot, and you, like I said, you are the queen of LinkedIn stories.
I think my dog shows up on LinkedIn stories more than I do.
That is never a problem. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
This was so fun. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thank you. And for everyone, that was Jasmine Escalera. She is a career coach. Be sure to follow her on LinkedIn. And thank you for joining us today. As always, I'm so appreciative of you spending the time with us. And I'm so appreciative of the people who work behind the scenes to make the show happen. We have Carrington, Stephen, Wes, Ellie, and maybe Madison. Sometimes she's back there. Not sure if she is today. But we have so many people who make the show happen, and I'm really appreciative of them. And I want to mention that, you can find great programming on the LinkedIn News page all the time. And next week, we'll be starting our Earth Day coverage. And we're live on Earth Day on LinkedIn News. Monday, we're kicking it off Earth Week with Captain Paul Watson. He's featured in the Netflix documentary Seaspiracy that examines the plight of the world's oceans. And the oceans are important. I remember reading a book a few years ago called The Sixth Extinction, and boy, was it terrifying. So watch on Monday, find out how you can help. And then obviously we are here every Friday with Get Hired Live. And next week we have Diana YK Chan, who is the founder and CEO of My Marketability. She'll be on the show April 23rd at 12 p.m. Eastern time. And we'll be answering all your questions and also talking about how you can build a professional brand. So thank you again for joining us. If you missed any part of the show, don't worry. You just go to the link above and click refresh and it'll start playing again. You could watch it whenever you want, actually. Just go back to the same link. And my producers should be posting the link to next week's show so you could RSVP to that. So until next week, please be safe, follow local health guidelines. You can only be a good candidate. You could only get a job if you're well enough to do so. So until next week, best of luck.